Imagine finding out that your daily 10-minute meditation routine, the one you use to find just a sliver of inner peace before work.
Right.
Imagine if that is actually doing the exact same thing to your brain as injecting a dose of morphine.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like, it isn't curing your stress at all. It's just temporarily, artificially masking the pain.
It completely reframes what we call self-care, doesn't it? I mean, instead of a path to enlightenment, that quiet room with the dim lighting and the comfortable cushion becomes, well, something much darker.
Yeah.
It becomes a hiding place, like a way to actively avoid reality.
Welcome to today's deep dive. If you are someone who loves turning conventional wisdom completely upside down, and you're looking for that aha moment that changes how you view your own daily routines, you're definitely in the right place.
Absolutely.
Today we are exploring a radically different approach to the entire concept of meditation. We're going to look at why trying to empty your mind might be the exact wrong approach if your actual everyday life is in a state of chaos.
And our grounding source material for this exploration is a rather provocative essay from 2012. It's written by an author named Schwiffing, and the title, it doesn't pull any punches either.
No, it really doesn't.
It's simply called Osho's Meditation Method. It doesn't work.
Now, just a quick note for you listening before we really get into the weeds here.
Hmm.
This source material makes some very aggressive claims.
Very.
It critiques massively popular spiritual movements, and ultimately it introduces its own specific organizations and alternative lifestyles as the solution. So our mission today is strictly to unpack the fascinating ideas, the psychology, and the structural arguments presented in this text.
Right. We are not here to endorse any specific spiritual doctrine or group or lifestyle. We are just here to understand the mechanics of this incredibly sharp argument.
Exactly. We're just dissecting the philosophy to see how it challenges our modern assumptions about wellness.
Right.
So Schwiffing starts this essay with a massive target, Osho. Now, for anyone unfamiliar, Osho was a hugely influential, globally recognized, and highly controversial spiritual guru.
Yeah, he popularized dynamic meditation methods back in the 1970s and 80s.
Right, and these weren't just your standard, sit quietly and breathe sessions. They often involved chaotic breathing, jumping, shouting, like intense physical catharsis to supposedly exhaust the mind into silence.
Which is wild to think about.
Right, but before Sui Feng tears these methods apart, he actually starts the essay by praising Osho.
He does. Schwiffing describes Osho as a great thinker and an enlightener. He uses a very specific, aggressive metaphor. He compares Osho's ideas to a bomb.
A bomb, okay.
Yeah. The argument here is that humanity has been confined in a mental prison for thousands of years, just entirely trapped by rigid traditions, religious dogma, and suffocating societal expectations.
Right, it's just stuck in these boxes.
Exactly. And Schwiffing credits Osho's radical philosophy as the explosive device that detonated those prison walls. It allowed people to step out of the rubble, basically, and face facts soberly and think freely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the praise stops pretty abruptly right after that visual.
It really does.
He calls him a liberator of thought, but then immediately pivots to say that Osho doesn't actually understand the ultimate principles of life.
Yeah.
Or even the fundamental concepts of time and space.
Yeah.
Which feels like a huge contradiction to me. Like, how can someone be a brilliant enlightener who blew up our mental prisons, but simultaneously be entirely ignorant of how the universe actually works?
Well, the text resolves that tension by separating the act of waking someone up from the act of guiding them.
Oh, I see.
Schwiffing is essentially arguing that Osho is an awakener. He is brilliant at shocking your system into realizing you are sick, that you are trapped in a societal prison, but relying on his methods to actually get healthy, to build a sustainable life outside of that prison. The essay says that's entirely futile.
So it's like Osho is like a brilliant medical diagnostician. He can look at your life, point at your anxiety, and tell you exactly what disease you have.
Exactly.
But he has absolutely no idea how to write the prescription to cure it.
Yeah, that analogy is perfect. And Schwiffing argues that Osho's prescription is fundamentally flawed because his very definition of meditation is structurally unsound.
How so?
Well, Osho defines meditation as transcending the mind and entering an unknown dimension.
Okay.
But to Schwiffing, building a life philosophy on an ambiguous, misty concept of entering the unknown is dangerous. It's like you cannot build a sturdy, reliable house on a foundation of fog.
Right.
If your goal is ultimate peace, but your method is to hurl yourself into an undefined mental dimension, the resulting practice is going to be chaotic. and ultimately useless.
Which brings us to the harsh reality of what people are actually doing.
Yeah.
Because if that foundational definition is flawed, what is happening to the millions of people around the world who are actively practicing these methods?
Right.
Like they're going to silent retreats, they are doing the hyper-awareness exercises, they are observing their thoughts, and this is where Feng delivers his most brutal critique of modern spirituality.
He really does. He dismisses these mainstream methods entirely. Breathing techniques, hyper-awareness, silent observation. He literally calls them delusional ravings.
Wow. Delusional raving.
Yeah. He asserts that these practices are merely scratching the surface of the human condition without ever penetrating the actual problem.
I mean, he diagnoses the people doing this with ostrich psychology.
Yeah.
Just sticking their heads in the sand and pretending the predator isn't there.
Exactly. Feng directly addresses the thousands of groups globally who practice these methods and claim they work wonderfully. He argues this is pure systemic self-deception.
Wow.
And this brings us to the morphine illusion you mentioned at the start of our deep dive.
Yeah, sitting in meditation or hiding away in a silent retreat without actually solving the core issues of your life is the spiritual equivalent of injecting heroin,
Yeah.
which is just a terrifying thought
Yeah.
because it implies that my attempt to find calm is actually an act of self-harm.
What's fascinating here is the mechanics of that analogy, because medically and psychologically, his logic tracks.
Walk me through that.
Well, what does morphine actually do? It blocks the pain receptors in your brain.
Right.
It does absolutely nothing to heal the broken leg. And it doesn't fight the infection. It just severs the communication between the injury and your awareness of the injury.
Okay, that makes sense.
So Feng is arguing that these surface-level meditation techniques do the exact same thing to your psychological state. You sit in a quiet room, you focus entirely on your breath, and you successfully block out the noise of your life.
So you get a temporary artificial sense of peace.
Precisely.
Okay, but wait a second. If thousands of people are doing this and feeling better, how can Feng just write it off as an illusion?
Right.
I mean, if the morphine of mainstream meditation wears off the second I open my eyes,
Yeah.
what is Feng's alternative? Does he expect us to just exist in a state of high anxiety until we figure it out?
It's a fair question.
Because I look at the people taking 10 minutes a day to breathe, and they genuinely feel better. Their smartwatch says their heart rate went down, their blood pressure drops. How can he just ignore that?
He doesn't ignore it. What's fascinating here is the rigid distinction he makes between symptom management and root cause resolution. Feng never denies that your blood pressure drops in that 10-minute window.
Okay.
He's pointing out the fragility of that state. If your peace relies on pretending your problems don't exist, like if it requires you to actively close your eyes and block out the world, it is guaranteed to shatter the very moment reality intrudes.
The second you leave the room.
Exactly. Once the spiritual drug wears off, once
Yeah.
you leave the yoga studio and get back in gridlock traffic, or you check your bank account, your mind is instantly thrown back into total chaos. The root problems driving the anxiety were never addressed. They were just temporarily muted.
So you haven't become a peaceful person. You're just a highly stressed person who was temporarily very still.
That's beautifully put, yeah. You cannot solve root-level life problems with superficial mental techniques. If your career is unfulfilling, your relationships are toxic, and your finances are a mess, sitting quietly and observing your thoughts doesn't unmess your life.
No, it doesn't.
The chaos is still waiting for you the moment you stand up.
Which forces us to look at his aggressively practical alternative. Because if hiding in a cave or doing breathing exercises is just spiritual morphine, what does he actually suggest we do to find real peace?
Right, so he starts by defining true meditation, which he refers to as jingsen. And he uses some incredibly dense traditional Buddhist concepts here. He describes it as the mind having nowhere to dwell.
Having nowhere to dwell. I mean, that sounds poetic, but how does that operate in a practical sense?
It means cultivating a mind that is completely unbound by physical or mental attachments. The text says it is a state unbound by form, sound, smell, taste, touch, or dharmas.
Okay, let's pause on that word, dharmas. For you listening, you aren't deep into Buddhist philosophy. That might sound like abstract jargon. What are dharmas in the context of our actual modern lives?
So in this context, dharmas are the phenomena of reality. They are the constructs, the rules, and the concepts we invent and attach ourselves to. Think about the rules of your workplace, or the societal definition of a successful marriage, or the pressure to hit certain milestones by a certain age. Those are dharmas.
I see. So it's like all the invisible rules we live by.
Exactly. Having a mind unbound by dharmas means you aren't mentally attached to those constructs. You aren't constantly agonizing over the concept of success or failure because you recognize those are just invented frameworks, not ultimate reality.
Right.
He describes this ultimate state as having no perception, no ignorance, no old age and death, no suffering, and no attainment.
Wow. That is the absolute peak of abstract spiritual philosophy. It sounds almost impossibly high level.
It does, but he immediately anchors it to the ground. He quotes the famous historical Chinese military strategist Zhuge Liang.
Oh, interesting transition.
Right. Zhuge Liang said, "Without tranquility, one cannot go far." And Zhu Feng expands on that ancient military wisdom to say that without true tranquility, there is no health, no order, no efficiency, and no harmony in your daily life.
Here's where it gets really interesting. He establishes this lofty, almost unreachable goal of ultimate tranquility, unbound by the rules of reality. But his method for getting there is so surprisingly blunt.
It is.
Like, he doesn't tell you to chant a mantra. He tells you to fix your immediate physical problems.
Yes, it is the ultimate rejection of spiritual bypassing.
Yeah.
How do you get to this enlightened state where the mind has nowhere to dwell? You handle your physical reality first.
Yeah.
If you are hungry, eat. If there is a gas leak in your house, fix the pipe. If a child is crying, soothe them.
It's like trying to install a calming software update while your actual computer is literally on fire.
Exactly.
Shufeng is saying you can't just plug your ears, close your eyes, and hope the fire goes out. You have to put the fire out first. You cannot meditate away basic human needs. Eating, clothing, housing, sickness, aging. These are the unavoidable realities of having a physical body in this world.
Right, and this is a brilliant grounding of spiritual text. So often, high-level spiritual teachings are criticized for being elitist or completely disconnected from the grit of daily survival.
Yeah, like they're only for people with no real problems.
Exactly, but Shafin argues that anyone who claims to be in a deep meditative state while actively ignoring a metaphorical gas leak in their life,
Like crushing credit card debt.
right, or a crumbling marriage, or a health issue they refuse to see a doctor for, that person isn't meditating. They are engaged in an elaborate, socially acceptable form of escapism.
The text explicitly states that running to the ends of the earth won't help you because your troubles pack their bags and travel with you.
They do?
You can fly to a silent retreat in the Himalayas, but if you are agonizing over a fight you had with your boss back home, you aren't really in the Himalayas. You are just sitting in a cold room, having an imaginary argument in your head.
Yeah, true tranquility requires a foundation of order in your actual physical life. You have to handle your business. Only when the metaphorical gas leak is fixed, the baby is asleep, and your basic survival needs are securely met can your mind truly begin to rest.
Otherwise, you're just fighting your own biology.
Exactly. Otherwise, your anxiety isn't a spiritual failing. It is a biological survival mechanism screaming at you that something in your environment is dangerous and needs fixing.
Okay, let's say we do the work. We fix the gas leak. We pay off the debt. We soothe the crying baby. Our physical environment is perfectly ordered.
Okay.
What is the highest possible state of tranquility then? Where do we go from there?
This is where Schwefeng introduces the central paradox of his entire philosophy. The highest state of meditation, the ultimate method of finding peace, is achieving what he calls no mind, or in Chinese, wuxin.
No mind. So like eradicating the mind entirely.
Yeah. To explain the mechanics of this, he leans heavily on Laozi, the ancient philosopher and founder of Taoism. He quotes Laozi regarding the concepts of favor and disgrace, specifically focusing on the physical body. Laozi essentially argues, the greatest misfortune is the self, or the body. If I had your body, what misfortune would I have?
Think about that for a second. Think about the last time you felt true panic.
Right?
Was it because a literal tiger was chasing you? Or because yourself, your professional reputation, your ego, your sense of identity at work was being threatened? The idea here is that simply existing, simply having a physical form and an identity is the root of all vulnerability.
Having a self is the ultimate vulnerability because you have a body, you can feel hunger, you can be physically injured, you can grow old. Because you have a social identity, you can be insulted, you can experience shame, you can lose your status.
Oh, yeah.
Every single anxiety you have stems from the need to protect this self. And Xufeng takes this Taoist concept of the physical body and applies it directly to the mind.
Okay.
The paradox he presents is this. Meditation is only necessary because you have a mind that constantly gets anxious trying to protect your identity.
If you didn't have a mind constantly projecting into the future to worry about your reputation, you would need a technique to quiet it down.
That is the core revelation. If you can achieve a state of no mind, there is literally nothing left that needs to be quieted. The entire concept of meditation becomes obsolete.
Right.
Like, why would you spend hours trying to sweep a room that doesn't even exist?
So what does this all mean? How do we actually go from fixing our daily problems, like literally paying our bills and cooking dinner, to this radical concept of completely dissolving the mind that causes the anxiety in the first place? That feels like a massive, almost impossible leap. How does someone structurally achieve no mind?
Well, this is where the philosophical text transitions into a highly specific systemic solution.
Ah, here we go.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of Shui Feng's essay, the author ultimately channels this entire critique of modern spirituality into a very specific curriculum and lifestyle.
Right. He spends all this time deconstructing our psychology, and then he delivers the final pitch.
He does. The text states that to actually achieve this state of no mind, an individual must read specific texts authored by him, the Chanyuan corpus and the Sufan corpus.
Okay.
But reading isn't enough. The ultimate solution presented is entering the second home lifestyle, which was founded by an organization called Life Chanyuan.
And this is why I need to wrap my head around the mechanics. How does moving into a specific community or adopting this second home lifestyle logically connect back to achieving no mind?
It connects directly back to the gas leak metaphor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The text argues that the traditional structures of society, like nuclear families, individual debt, personal property, climbing the corporate ladder, those are engines that constantly generate new gas leaks.
That's true. You fix one and another pops up.
Exactly. You are always going to have a new bill to pay or a new societal pressure to face. So the second home lifestyle is proposed as a communal living structure designed to completely remove the friction of traditional family and economic burdens.
So by restructuring your entire physical environment, you eliminate the daily anxieties.
The theory is that if the community handles the survival aspects collectively, if food, shelter, and care are structurally guaranteed without individual competition, your brain literally has nothing left to worry about.
You don't have to defend your individual economic status?
Right. You don't have to stress over your personal property. By systematically eliminating the real-world gas leaks through communal living, the self doesn't have to constantly be on high alert.
Wow.
And without constant threats to respond to, the mind can finally power down, theoretically allowing that anxious self to dissolve entirely into the state of no mind.
So he builds this incredibly robust, universally relatable critique of how we use mindfulness to hide from our problems. He breaks down human psychology, gives aggressively practical advice to fix your life, and then concludes that the only way to finalize this process is to abandon mainstream society and join this specific communal system.
Right. It perfectly illustrates how deep philosophical critiques often lead to alternative systemic solutions. Shui Feng is arguing that the mainstream systems, both our economic system and our spiritual systems like Osho's methods, are fundamentally broken and generate endless anxiety.
Yeah.
Therefore, you cannot find peace within those systems. He is offering a completely new paradigm for living that, according to the text, is the only structural way to truly achieve that state of no mind.
Man, we have covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We started by looking at mainstream meditations, the breathing exercises and silent retreats so many of us rely on. And we viewed them through this harsh lens as a temporary morphine high, a way to artificially mask the pain of our lives without ever curing the underlying disease.
We then explored the brutal, practical necessity of fixing your real-world gas leaks. The absolute truth that you cannot achieve spiritual tranquility if your physical reality is in a state of unmanaged chaos. You just have to pay the bills and soothe the crying baby first.
Right. You have to put out the fire before you can enjoy the warmth of the room. And finally, we looked at Laozi's radical concept of having no mind. The idea that simply possessing an identity is the root of all our vulnerability, and how Shui Feng channels that Taoist philosophy into the communal lifestyle of the second home to structurally eliminate anxiety.
It is a comprehensive rejection of the quick fix. It really demands a total restructuring of how you approach your problem.
It really does. And it makes me want to ask you, the listener, to look honestly at your own routine today. Think about the things you do to decompress after a long week. Are you using your daily workouts, your hobbies, or even your own dedicated meditation practice to actively ignore a crying baby or a metaphorical gas leak in your real life?
Yeah.
Are you taking the morphine because it's easier than fixing the broken pipe?
It is an uncomfortable audit of your own life, but an absolutely necessary one if true tranquility is what you are actually after.
It changes everything about how you define self-care. But before we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over, building on that intense concept we discussed near the end. Sui Feng leaned heavily on Laozi's idea that our anxiety, our vulnerability, and our desperate need for meditation all stem from the simple fact that we possess a mind and a self.
Right, the heavy burden of having an identity that you constantly have to protect.
Exactly. So think about this. If all your struggles, your stress, and your pain come from having a self, and if you somehow successfully achieve that ultimate perfect state of no mind, where you shed all your attachments and your identity to escape those struggles,
Yeah.
would the person who finally found that peace even be you anymore?